Okay, getting back to the issue. The question was asked in the film. By the way, I hope you saw some of, again, the tactics. They're pretty well continuing that type of strategy. If there's a meeting, to have people seated in the audience with their drill routines, their assignments, their hats, to disrupt and to antagonize or to try to neutralize or negate a person's credibility, whatever, by blurting out, yelling out, etc. And you saw Heber Gents verify the claims that you're trained never to answer a question. If you're dealing with suppressive people or organizations or difficult questions, you don't answer the question. You talk all around it, and you end up turning around and attacking the person. This is the drill they put you through, and try to cave people in. This is not real ethical. But this is the typical approach they do use to deal with these issues of fact. Also, their questions were raised there about the pattern of the Church of Scientology to be involved in so many lawsuits. And Heber Gents adroitly, or attempted to adroitly, shift again the subject by saying, well, look at all the Fortune 500 companies, and they have many lawsuits too. That's nothing unusual. But we're not talking about a corporation. We're talking about a church. I thought, not a corporation, or maybe we are talking about a corporation, but which is it? Or is it both? I'll never forget the time I spent with a Scientologist in Los Angeles. And they were at this conference that I was attending, and they were engaging people in dialogue outside the conference, and I saw opportunities. I don't mind opportunities to dialogue with people if I've got some time. And so I met with this man who was an OT8. He was kind of reluctant for some reason to first give me what his status was on the bridge. But he did. We talked about maybe an hour and a half. He was a Roman Catholic background. And I told him my problem was, of course, that Scientology was not compatible with Christianity. That's my major objection. And he said, well, yes, it is. I'm Roman Catholic, and it's compatible. And we started discussing those issues. And, this guy didn't understand Roman Catholicism and Christianity at all, and its real teachings. But anyway, we met, and I asked him, the last thing I asked him, I'll never get the look on his face before we parted company. I said, Richie, if you're an OT8, have you ever asked yourself the question, why are you still wearing glasses? I'll never forget the look on his face. Yeah, he was kind of stumped him there for a second. That's an important thing to keep in mind as far as reality. People ask, they say, can you share your faith more effectively with people in Scientology? And that's one of the things you can begin to show, is to point out that Scientology does not deliver. It says it always delivers. It never delivers.
Saved my life in 1968.
Okay.
Goodbye. I may be wearing glasses, but I'm often saved.
Now, be courteous. Be courteous. Yes, I'm being courteous. The point here, again, is it delivers as far as what CLEAR is supposed to maintain, is supposed to produce in people's lives, doesn't deliver. The OT levels are supposed to produce in people's lives, doesn't deliver. I'm not saying it doesn't have changes. You don't have changes in your life, but that doesn't mean it delivers what it promises it's going to deliver. That's the issue. Okay, this is what I wanted to read here. This is back to Hubbard's idea of having been cured in 1949 using his Dianetics approach. Crippled and blind at the end of the war, he resumed his studies of philosophy, and his discoveries, by his discoveries, recovered so fully that he was reclassified in 1949 for full combat duty. This is what the church says. Matter of medical record, he has twice been pronounced dead. In 1950, he was given a perfect score in his mental, physical fitness reports. Yet, in a letter to the Veterans Administration, Hubbard writes, 2 years after this, he writes this: This is a request for treatment. After trying and failing for 2 years to regain my equilibrium in civil life, I'm utterly unable to approach anything like my own competence. My last physician informed me that it may be very helpful if I were to be examined, perhaps treated psychiatrically. Well, what an admission. I cannot account for the rise above, nor rise above for long periods of moroseness and suicidal inclinations. I cannot myself afford such treatment. Would you please help me? Sincerely, L. Ron Hubbard.
That's a lie, sir. All of you folks are being brainwashed. Don't insult me, sir. Don't insult me.
Oh, gosh. Hey, again, these people are drilled to do this. They're under orders. They have to do it. Okay, last. Yeah. What we're reading from, of course, are records that, of course, the government is in a big conspiracy with Interpol to cover up the real truth about L. Ron Hubbard. This is, of course, some stuff they say. But these are official records derived from in court and by request for freedom of information. And I wish that Scientologists would get a hold of those real information rather than just listen to the propaganda they're given about their Messiah, L. Ron Hubbard. All right, let me take a brief portion here. We're going to show a part of this video section, then we're going to hear more from Lisa and Andre. I'll put this down here. And this is, again, a part of our concern about how Scientology claims to be compatible and with Christianity, and how to believe and practice Scientology, you don't have to discard your beliefs of Christianity. This is from a BBC portion of the film about the OT levels, a very brief section here.
About 15 years before that. That's the only person I ever told about that.
This 1972 directive that the FBI seized is a frank statement of one of Hubbard's aims. Item A, make money. Down the list, item J also reads, make money. Item K, make more money. And item L, make other people produce so as to make money. The place where the Church of Scientology offers its higher level courses, and therefore takes the most money, is here in Clearwater, Florida. This headquarters they call Flag, where Scientologists from all over the world come to buy the so-called upper levels. The converted hotel is where Hubbard's elite Sea Org came ashore. The functionaries are as likely to be dressed as naval officers as priests. Scientologists usually join the staff if they cannot afford the fees to take the courses for free. But despite their snappy uniforms, most are paid very meager wages. Here, the staff administers the esoteric programs of auditing that Hubbard went on writing right up to his death. And it's a highly profitable activity. Scientologists have to go up the bridge. That is, take a series of courses, each more expensive than the last. The midpoint is called clear. After that, you progress through the upper levels that can cost up to £600 an hour. How do you think Hubbard succeeded in getting so many thousands of people to take his courses and to go on taking extra courses and spending more and more money?
First one's free, second one costs you. It's like an extended sting operation. At first you get lots more than you ever thought that you were going to get, and real changes take place in your life. But as you go up the so-called bridge, you no longer get the benefits, and then you're told it's because of things that you've done in your past. Things, wrongs that you've committed against mankind. And of course, you have to sign up for more auditing to find those things and handle them.
The upper level courses are called OT, which stands for Operating Thetan, Hubbard's word for the spirit. The OT levels are supposedly so powerful that you can die of pneumonia if you're exposed to them unprepared. It costs around £5,000 to take OT3, which contains Hubbard's cosmology. The Church has tried to keep this material secret, but former senior Scientologists in America have leaked it, and versions have been published. This is an outline of the story.
75 million years ago, this planet was called Tigyac. There were 90 planets in this sector called the Galactic Confederation.
This is part of the text of a Hubbard lecture.
They had elected a fellow by the name of Zemu to the supreme ruler, and they were about to unelect him. And he took the last moments he had in office to really goof the floof. Zemu decided to take radical measures to overcome the population problem. Beings were captured on other planets and flown to locations near 10 volcanoes or more on Earth. H-bombs were dropped on the volcanoes, destroying the bodies of the beings who, as thetans, attached themselves to one another as clusters. A revolt followed of the loyal officers against Zemu. Zemu was locked up in an electronic mountain fortress and remains there still. Since that time, beings born on this planet have had clusters of thetans attached to their bodies. OT3 can run out these clusters and cause them to leave us and reincarnate as individuals.
After hours of expensive auditing, you are rid of the body thetans attached to you. You may then acquire psychic powers, move objects at a distance, and have out-of-body experiences. If you find you can't, then you must take the course again for another £5,000. Ex-Scientologist Frank Notaro used the name Xenu in a demonstration outside a church building and got beaten up. Why is it so secret?
Because Ron says that if people find out about this information, that they will get sick and die if they find out this information without paying the money.
Well, did anybody who read your T-shirt get sick or die?
The only person who got sick was me because I got beat up. Stun gun. So, well, I just want people to find out about what's been going on and what the church is really all about.
L. Ron Hubbard and the church he founded spent money...
Okay, I'm going to let Lisa come up and share some that she wants to talk about as far as, again, understanding the incorporation into it and the hold that it has on people as they're in the group. It'll help you understand how to relate to people that are in the Church of Scientology a little better.
That last guy on the video who was mentioning Xenu and OT3 as a hoax and he got beat up, I was there at a courthouse in Los Angeles when I'm not sure if it was that exact incident or another person was also carrying placards that mentioned Xenu and so forth. I hadn't done OT3 yet, and all the other Scientologists around me were, oh, shut your eyes. And they're trying to shield me from this horrible thing of just seeing the word Xenu on a placard because they firmly believed that I would get pneumonia and die if I saw that without having worked my way up to clear and then OT1 and 2 before getting that information. I do have to say that when I was graduating from the University of California at Santa Barbara, if the people in Dianetics and Scientology had come up to me then and said, well, 75 or 6 million years ago, there was this guy named Xenu. He wanted to solve a problem of overpopulation in this segment of the universe. He sent his renegades out to these various planets. They shot all these people. They transported all these many bodies to Earth, placed them on these various volcanoes, blew up the volcanoes with H-bombs. This destroyed the bodies of these people, but the spirits were left over. They subjected the spirits to 45 days of implants, including pictures of trains, cars, planes, modern British society, plus then later I found out God, Jesus, the Christian cross, and so forth. It goes on and on. And then they packaged them up. They divided them up between Las Palmas in the Atlantic and Hawaii in the Pacific, and they packaged them and mushed them up into clusters and groups, and that all of us walking around on this planet today in a body have tons of other of these little beings smushed up into us as a result of this thing. If they'd told me that in 1976, I guarantee you I would not have spent 15 years and $250,000 in Scientology. But obviously it doesn't work that way. They don't, the OT levels are dangled as this golden carrot over your head, and it's built up and up and up, but before you do that, you're not quite ready. You don't quite have enough chutzpah as a Thetan to handle that information, so we've got to start you lower and lower. The video earlier where the Canadian video before lunch where the young man was in front of the Church of Scientology in Toronto, and he was fielding all these questions from the reporter very well. He had been well trained. He did his job very well. I think in that video it was mentioned about taking a personality test, and the reporter said that she had earlier gone into Scientology organization, taken a personality test and so forth, and had the evaluation, but she didn't stick with it. That's actually how my first contact in Scientology was this thing called the OCA. OCA stands for Oxford Capacity Analysis, and it is a little personality test, and I made the error of jumping to the conclusion that the Oxford in Oxford Capacity Analysis must have meant Oxford University in England, and that lent it credibility. Well, I found out later that that doesn't have anything to do with Oxford University. But when you fill out this personality test and someone goes over it, they have a method of grading it, and they put the information on a graph, and you have high points and low points in various aspects of one's personality, like, happiness, happy or unhappy, and dealing with problems or not dealing with problems. Do you have a high confront, and can you go out and take charge of things, or do you have a low confront and you're more fearful or reticent, and so on and so forth. And basically, the person interpreting this test, in talking over the results, they just want to get you to talk and tell about how you feel about your high points and your low points, your strong areas and your weak areas, and they're hunting and punching and looking for your Achilles heel. They're looking for your weak spots. And everybody's got something. Nobody is entirely perfect. If you are not in a particularly vulnerable phase of your life at the time that you take this OCA and talk with a test evaluator in the Scientology organization, chances are it's not going to bite with you. And many, many, many people come into Scientology churches, or they get the OCA through the mail. They take it, send it in. It's graded. They call you up, set up an appointment. You go in, they sit down with you and go over it, and you just walk out the door and do nothing. Or they might pay for a course and never show up. Scientology has to work very, very, very hard and send out lots of personality tests and sell many, many, many Dianetics books just in order to get one person in the door who sticks with it long enough to go all the way up the OT levels. But when they get somebody, normally they are in a situation, they're in a vulnerable phase of their life. I lacked direction, didn't know where to go after I had completed my career in education. Andre just got out of the Vietnam War, and that was a tough time for the whole nation. And there aren't any Vietnam vets that I'm aware of who didn't have trouble adjusting back into normal society after that. It could be so small as an aspiring writer got a rejection notice from a publisher, and he's down, and he happens to contact the Scientologist who does the dissemination drill on him and gets him hooked. Lots of people, they're unsuccessful in their personal relationships. They can't find a spouse, a husband or wife, or they are in a personal relationship and they're having difficulty with it because marriage is not this, bed of roses and this perfectly easy thing that it comes naturally and it's a piece of cake. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time and energy to make a marriage work, and also difficulty in raising children, which can be very frustrating, yet rewarding. Life is just strewn with all kinds of vulnerable possibilities, and a good test evaluator in Scientology is just trained to hunt and peck, and find that weak area, and then they rub salt in the wound. Well, what's going to happen if you don't do anything about it? It's not going to get better, is it? Well, no, I guess you're right. It's going to get worse, isn't it? Well, yeah. And they might even paint the picture even more clearly. Well, what's going to happen if it gets worse? Well, maybe my wife will leave me, or whatever. I mean, this is a hypothetical example.
Let me share a couple things.
Sure.
I'll piggyback on this. I know of 3 separate situations, 3 women who didn't know each other, had not talked to each other, but went out to Scientology, 2 of them through Sterling Management, a front organization for Scientology, and they were told exactly the same thing. Their personality test showed that they had such problems that if they didn't take care of them, that they were going to either hurt or kill their young children. Now you can imagine what that does to a person in a vulnerable situation who's out there for a long period of time after making a heavy financial commitment to an organization, to be told that, and to be told that you need to have us handle this or deal with this and help you out of this right now. Three women told exactly the same thing.
You read the book Dynamics and Modern Science of Modern Health, Modern Science of Mental Health, and you'll see that Hubbard was a big believer in pregnant women attempting to abort their own children with knitting needles and coat hangers and making many, many attempts throughout their pregnancy. I mean, it's all there in the book, so that doesn't surprise me at all. But the point is that if you have an open wound at the moment, they'll find it, rub salt in it, and use that as the hook. And then it goes on from there, but it escalates slowly. Andre was in the Sea Organization pretty much the whole time he was in Scientology. There were some very intense punishment procedures in the Sea Organization that rank-and-file public who never join any kind of staff sometimes never even hear about, and of course would never be subjected to. So there's lots of echelons in Scientology. If you're a public person, well, where are you on the bridge? They had that bridge was shown in the latest video. One side is courses and training that you can do to gain knowledge, and the other side is the counseling where you receive the auditing or you learn how to audit yourself on the upper OT levels. And then there are other courses and lots of auditing that aren't even on that bridge that are used to supposedly in special cases, like Joe Blow comes in and he wants to go clear, but well, you've got to do this thing called the false purpose rundown because we've diagnosed this as your spiritual problem, and maybe you need to do the happiness rundown. And then maybe you need to go and do this thing called the Key to Life course, which is probably about 10 grand, and, it might take you a year or so. Before you can do grades 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, after which you could do your New Era Dianetic auditing, and then you will become clear. And the person hasn't paid a penny for an OT level yet, and the OT levels are very expensive. So it goes on and on from there. Was there something... I'm turning to Craig for a prompt.
But yeah, anything if you think of something later you want to say again, just let me know.
Oh, there was one other point that I wanted to bring out very vividly, because Scientology is they're big sticklers on the written word, and Hubbard's written words and his taped materials, and that you duplicate it exactly as it's written, and that you not alter it at all. But to be perfectly frank, I found out that in my experience as a public person, there are a lot of things that go on in the Scientology community that aren't necessarily documented by L. Ron Hubbard, yet it's just kind of, well, that's the way it is. A big deterrent to leaving. I mean, you've got to be sitting there hearing some of these stories and thinking, well, why did she stay? Why did he stay? How come you didn't leave? It was very clearly implied to me that if I left Scientology, I would die, or bad things would happen to me, and I would become so miserable that I might as well be dead. Whenever I heard about other people who left Scientology, this is when I was in Scientology and I was a loyal, good, hardworking Scientologist. I wrote up my Overton withholds practically as soon as they occurred. I mean, I just really tried to come clean all the time. Whenever I heard of people who left Scientology, the first idea is, well, maybe we can get them back, especially if it was somebody that I knew personally. But if that doesn't look like it's going to happen pretty soon, that person is your enemy. If they were your friend before, they're not anymore. If they left Scientology, curtains, the friendship is over. So all of your relationships and your friendships and the love or, quote, affinity that you might have for other people is totally conditional on them also being in Scientology and playing the same game. And I have very, very sharp, clear memories of hearing about certain people who left. And I remember how I felt about their leaving and how I completely changed my opinion of that person instantaneously. And stories would be circulated around about people who left who then got cancer and died, people who left and were hit by a truck and died or disabled, someone, you know, if a horrible accident doesn't befall you, it's going to be a disease or something, and it's kind of like bad karma. If you leave, this is the only road to total spiritual freedom, and if you fall off that road, once the truth has been revealed to you and then you leave, it's curtains. And that's a big deterrent. It's a big fear factor. I found in retrospect that there are many, many fear tactics, subtle but very present, in Scientology that keep people on the path and pursuing it, even if it's kind of a miserable existence. When I got out of Scientology, I was allowed to sort of fully evaluate the whole experience and was amazed to find out how incredibly miserable I had been in Scientology. And it's a very pressure-filled experience. When I was in Scientology, I was told, your perceptions will be so much more clearer, colors will seem brighter, and everything will be in much better focus in terms of your visual perception of our world. And that's actually what happened when I got out of Scientology. I was agog with how green the greens were and the yellows of the flowers, and it was like this fog had been lifted, and I didn't know the fog was there, and I've been working through this fog, and it drained me of a lot of energy. But I was totally unaware of it because I was in the mindset, I was following the tech as best I could, I was getting my money together, I was putting it on the bridge, I was contributing thousands to the International Association of Scientologists so that they could fight their wars against the governments and all the alleged conspiracies that are against Scientology and trying to prevent it from succeeding. So that's an important thing when you see people walking around on the streets of Clearwater chained to their briefcases and so forth, and people in their Sea Org uniforms and so forth, and you just wonder, well, why don't they just leave? There's a really good deterrent there.
Keep Scientology working? Did you remember? The conditional of the...
Well, there's one little... I didn't particularly want to get too much into that. Keeping Scientology working is a policy letter that everyone reads many times in Scientology because it's the first item to read in every course that you take, ever. And you go over... after a while, you just have read it so many times, you've got the whole thing memorized. Hubbard talks about... instilling a fixed, dedicated glare that the supervisors in these courtrooms are supposed to, really make these people into Scientologists and make sure they've got this fixed, dedicated glare. Ex-Scientologists get together and marvel at the incredible hardness and meanness that they developed as Scientologists, not to mention unbelievable... not that everybody in Scientology does this, but boy, everybody I knew in Scientology cussed like you can't believe. Puts the sailors to shame. But the cussing, it's not, I don't want to make a big issue about that, but I've spoken with hundreds of people who, after they got out of Scientology, were amazed at the dark, hard, forceful, mean, vicious, and possibly evil side of their personality was developed by being in Scientology. That might not happen to everybody, but I've spoken with many, many people who feel this way. It's a black and white issue. You're either in Scientology or you're not. If you're not in Scientology, you're a WOG. And WOGs are not spoken about in complimentary terms. But yet when the PR people are talking with non-Scientologists and trying to sort of sell you on Scientology, they think you're wonderful. It's a double-edged sword, and there are many, many contradictions which, when you're in Scientology, the thought reform techniques cause you to develop ways of not connecting the dots, not seeing the inconsistencies. And I will tell you, I was extremely humiliated when I started connecting the dots and found out, how L. Ron Hubbard wasn't anything like what he was supposed to be, and he's the next best thing to God, and God isn't really part of the Scientology belief at all. And it's quite a come down. Scientology is a big, big ego trip, and it's a big step down when you come out of it. But in coming out of Scientology, that was the most growing experience that I've ever had. I mean, I felt like a flower that daily I was blooming and the petals were opening up, and it was incredibly powerful and very, very difficult to describe in a short period of time what it was like to come out of Scientology, sort of recover my original self from age 22, catch it up to age 37, and go out and start functioning in the real world. It was amazing and incredible, and so much better than anything I experienced when I was in Scientology. So that was that experience.
Right. Thank you.
I think that's enough.
Thank you, Lisa. That's great. Have Andre share in a second. Another aspect. Let me read to you so you'll understand what we're talking about as far as this black and white issue. You're either keeping Scientology working or you're not. You don't. If anybody has any questions or doubts, is not totally committed to it, get them out. You have to be totally committed to it. Well, as a Christian, we believe in total commitment to Christ. But that doesn't mean it's exactly apples and apples here. We talk about being totally committed or out. It also could be a mind control technique. And I think if you look at these other aspects, you begin to see which one it lines up on. Don't ask any questions. If you ask the hard questions, if you buck the system at all, you can't be. You got to toe the line, keep the tech exactly right without any deviation or questions about it. This is the order they call the Suppressive Acts Order by L. Ron Hubbard. To the extreme urgency of our mission, I have worked to remove some of the fundamental barriers to from our progress. The chief stumbling block, huge above all others, is the upset we have with potential trouble sources and their relationship to suppressive persons or groups. A potential trouble source is defined as a person who, while active in Scientology or a PC, yet remains connected to a person or group who is a suppressive person or group. In other words, if you're married to a Scientologist and that person is not a Scientologist or is a Scientologist who begins to doubt or question or fight against the organization, then you become a potential trouble source, even though you're not doing it yourself. A suppressive person or a group is one that actively seeks to suppress or damage Scientology or a Scientologist by suppressive acts. Suppressive acts are defined as calculated to impede or destroy Scientology or a Scientologist, and which are listed at length in this policy letter. Okay, Andre, you want to... Oh, let me read one more thing. This is from the Quill, which is the journalist, one of their premier journals for journalists and writers. And they interviewed Robert Welkos, one of the writers for the Los Angeles Times investigative report, that very much in-depth and revealing series of stories. He writes this, talking about harassment. He says, in the, quote, Manual of Justice, which is Scientology's Manual of Justice, Hubbard gave a point-by-point instructions on how to deal with the Bad Magazine article. First, he wrote, tell them by letter to retract that at once in the next issue. The second step, he said, is to hire a private detective of a national-type firm to investigate the writer, not the magazine, and get any criminal or communist background that man has. The third step is to have lawyers write the magazine threatening suit, and then use the information gleaned from the investigator to make the writer, quote, shudder into silence, unquote. Using lawyers to attack his critics is the standard Scientology procedure. Not quoting now from the article. This is Welkos again. Using Scientology lawyers to attack his critics is a standard Scientology procedure. Among the millions of words Hubbard left to his followers were precise directives on how to deal with critics in the press. Quote, the purpose of the lawsuit is to harass and discourage rather than win. And that's certainly been borne out. We've got a whole stack of lawsuits they've tried to harass people with that have been settled or withdrawn just to try to milk you and make you pay a lot of money so you'll just won't bother with Scientology again because it's just too painful or too expensive, whatever. We do not want Scientology to be reported in the press anywhere else than on the religious pages of the newspapers. Therefore, we should be very alert to sue for slander at the slightest chance so as to discourage the public presses from even mentioning Scientology. Quote, never agree to an investigation of Scientology. Only agree to investigation of the attacker instead. Start feeding lurid blood, sex, crime, actual evidence. Oh, that's different for a change. On the attack to the press. Don't ever tamely submit to an investigation of us. Make it tough. Rough on the attackers all the way. When British author Russell Miller wrote a critical biography of Hubbard, 1988, an anonymous caller to police implicated Miller in an unsolved axe slaying of a South London private eye. Miller was interrogated by Scotland Yard, which later admitted the investigation was a waste of time and it caused Mr. Miller much embarrassment. The Sunday Times of London interviewed a private detective in 1987 who said he had been paid $2,500 by the Church of Scientology for attempting to smear Miller. The private eye was quoted as saying that he thought Miller was at risk and added, quote, people acting for the church are willing to pay large sums for men to discredit him. They will stop at nothing, unquote. When the St. Petersburg Times planned a review of another biography that was critical of Hubbard, it received a letter from a Scientology attorney threatening to sue the newspaper. Quote, we have evidence that your paper has a deep-seated bias against the church, and if you intend to hit the church hard with this review, the letter from Los Angeles attorney Timothy Bowles said, if you forward one of these lies, you will be finding yourself in court facing not only libel and slander charges, but you'll also charges for conspiracy to violate civil rights. If you publish anything at all on it, you may still find yourself defending charges in court in light of what we know about your intentions. We know a whole lot more about your institution and motives than you think, unquote. Whew. The newspaper published its review and Bowles' letter. And again, I can testify that I personally get some of this same type of stuff as well. The biggest horror story belongs to New York author Paulette Cooper. Cooper, who wrote the scathing 1972 book called The Scandal of Scientology, was indicted on charges for making bomb threats against the church. The charges were eventually dismissed when authorities discovered that the church had obtained her own stationery that she had touched and used it to forge the bomb threats. That's just an example of what kind of activity this one ethical, moral group that has no conflict with Christianity does. Andre, you want to share something?
I was in the organization called the Sea Organization for most of my time in Scientology. Actually, my non-Sea Org staff of Scientology was very short. One of the things that occurred to me, and it was my experience, is the way a person is changed from thinking, I don't want to do this anymore, to thank you, oh gracious Master-at-Arms, for allowing me back into the group. From, I don't like it here, I don't like it here, let me go, kabang, door slammed, you're locked in a room, he'll go over it, he'll get over it, he'll get over it. To, thank you, oh gracious one, you let me out, I feel better. It's kind of like a thought reform program. It's called rehabilitation. And what they rehabilitate is, you had an idea when you first started the organization that a world without criminals, a world without insanity, and a world without crime is worthwhile. And it is. That's very worthwhile. But a world that denies Christ is not a worthwhile world. That is a world of Lucifer. Anyway, so what I experienced in the RPF, Rehabilitation Project Force, and I spent, out of my 22 years, I spent maybe 4.5, 5 years in and out. The longest time was with Mr. Shillington, who was here earlier, but decided he wanted to say something and leave. Was with him at the Cedars Complex in California. The first thing I experienced, let me back up a little bit. I went to the RPF for violating rules and regulations which were laid out and constituted as crimes and high crimes and so forth by the Church of Scientology. And I had violated those unintentionally, but they got violated. It occurred. I think I did some, what they call is an overt product. Something that you try to make that doesn't turn out the way it's supposed to be. And my Oxford capacity analysis examination after long-term auditing was very low on the left and very low on the right, which means per the standard set in the policies and scriptures of Dianetics, I was insane and not myself. So those were two qualifications, over products and your OCA is on the low on the left and low on the right, verifiable by your folder inspection. They look at your confessional formulary, and they look at the things you've been saying. I think I mentioned once that I had the thought of leaving. I had the thought that maybe Scientology really doesn't work. And I've been having these kind of thoughts, and I was voicing them in my counseling. And I voiced several times that I really no longer believed that Ron Hubbard was who he said he was. And I was surprisingly removed from my job. I was taken to Cedars Complex. I was put into a Cedar Complex. This was in 1977, and they had just purchased the building. So I was put down in the basement, and the morgue was still in there because it was a hospital. And I got to have one of those little morgue slots as a bed. And it was eerie at first, but then after, I think about 25 days, I felt better about it. And they started warming up the leftovers. So I have taken some notes because I'm not going to try to remember everything that occurred to me. Anyway, the first thing was I was isolated socially. I was taken away from the mainline group of Scientology. At the time, I was actually a Master at Arms at the Advanced Organization of Los Angeles. And I was solitarily confined, which means in a room, sat there, note underneath the door, who are you? Anyway, and that went on for about 5 days. And I still, I'd flip the note back under, blank you, stuff you. Very upset. I just wanted to leave. And I didn't want to be there anymore, and I didn't want to be there anymore, and I didn't want to be there anymore, and I didn't want to be there anymore. But for some reason, it kept me there. Why? I don't know. I wasn't really that talented. I'm not really that kind of a talented person that I know how to do a lot of things. I wasn't really that good of a staff member. I wasn't really that good of a practitioner. And I really didn't do much for the organization up to that point. But yet they were just bound and determined to keep me there for some reason. Anyway, so I experienced the confinement. Then I started experiencing starvation. Hungry. I'm hungry. And it was just not really like you think I'm saying the word starvation. Maybe it's the wrong word. I wasn't given enough food to satisfy my hunger. I was given rice and I was given beans. And so it went. Then the next thing I got was lack of sleep. I was forced to work 6 hours with 6 hours of sleep throughout this. I think it's the RPF regime. You have no rights. You have nothing. Anyway, so that went on. And then I was physically abused. Not like, don't get me the wrong idea. It wasn't like people pounding and beating me and doing all that kind of stuff. When I say physically abused, it's like I was tired from a week worth of work, but yet I was still being made to wake up and go to work. I was still being made to get up and go to work. And I was getting tired of it. And I said, listen, why don't you just let me go? You're too valuable. You're a valuable being. Well, I wasn't even clear. I hadn't even reached the point where I could deal with this mentally. And anyway, I went clear on that, around that area. Yeah. I could withstand all the physical stuff. I didn't get sick anymore. But anyway, and then I had what is known as personal betrayal. Here I got letters from people that are in the organization, disconnect letters. And I was told that I was evil, I was bad. I did all these things wrong to them. I was yelling and screaming at them. And I was horrifying them horribly. Okay? So that's a personal betrayal thing. Now this is just the first 7 to 8 days, these things I'm talking about right now. And the result. From that, I was like, I don't know what to say, guys. I still want to go. Could you just let me out? Open that. It was a little, kind of like a little cage where they bring the bodies in and they stuff them in those little morgue boxes. Got out, get in the box, and boom, clink. Anyway, I don't think they're still there anymore. And then I got started getting what is known as personal humiliation. I'd given up some secrets in my auditing, and they were brought down to me. What do you say about this? What do you want me to say? I did it. I already told you I did it. What do you want? What if we publish this to everybody? Go ahead. I just want to leave. So, see, I was still in I wasn't going to deal with this anymore. I just wanted to go. They probably would have done really good. I probably wouldn't be here today if they would have just said, okay, Andre, leave, go, bye. They didn't. And then the next cycle that was concurrent while I was in there is torture. Not the kind of torture where they twist your arm until it twists around about 7 times. Okay, I'll stay. No. It was a constant, what have you done? What have you withheld? What have you done? What have you withheld? What have you done? What have you withheld? To the point of I was thinking I was crazy. And the result of that, I pondered suicide. I could leave if I killed myself. I'm a Satan. I could just go get another body. But I was not brave enough. Thank you. So then I got what is known as electronic interrogation, where you have your little meter, your little thing there, has a little needle goes back and forth. If you did something, it goes down. If you didn't do something, the needle floats and you're okay. So I got that concurrent with all the other different things that I was now undergoing. And a constant, every day at the end of the day before I went to bed, Andre, how do you feel about being in the Sea Org in Scientology? Forget about the fact that you're in the RPF right now. Just how do you feel about being in Scientology? Are you still with us? I don't know. You guys are treating me pretty bad here. I don't know. So, that was the first week. Oh. All right. The next week. More social isolation. At that point, I still had some people around me. And I was working with some people. But I wasn't changing. Notes to the effect of, get better, please, we love you. Get better, please. To, we hate you, we don't want you around us anymore. We're disconnecting from you because you're evil. So, more solitary confinement. This time I was just confined to the area of the morgue area, and I would be able to scrub the walls of the morgue with rags and water and wash it down and wash it down and wash it down. Meanwhile, I was taken into the little room, put on the cans again, as they call it. You get on the cans, and I was asked the question, what have I done, what have I withheld? What have I done, what have I withheld? However, this time I started to think, I got to do something to end this. I mean, this is like getting ridiculous. I'm already 10 days into this thing. Haven't seen my son, haven't seen my wife. So, that's what I'm starting to think. Maybe they're not bad at all. Maybe it really is me. Maybe I really am bad. And I asked the auditor, Steve Crivello, I said, Steve, maybe I am bad. Andre, your needle is floating. My needle is floating, and all I did, I was voicing, that was a major change for them. I did something that you're not supposed to do. I realized that I was bad, but it was sort of like an accident. It wasn't really a realization. It was more of like maybe I am. And, okay. Well, from that, needle floating, hey, man, I'm getting out of here. I know the way. Say what they want to hear. Say exactly what they want to hear. And magically, things started getting better. I got a little bit more food. It was sandwiches, water, but I still had to go back to the morgue and eat it. I'd go get it and then I'd go back. So it wasn't really that good. Anyway, I got a little bit more sleep. They added a half an hour to my schedule. So I slept for 6.5 hours, and I was only up for, 17.5, something like that. And I was getting more issues. Lorraine Barkley, John Segoda, Ian, he left. Those were the people who were managing me at the time. They were taking care of me. I was in a severe isolated state. And Ian said that it's possible if I continue doing well, I would probably get to see my son. Hey. So, the work role changed a little. I started getting less heavy work, but more sort of like putting things together type of work. Hey, this is getting better. I get it. If I do what they want, things will get better. Are you following me on this? This is exactly what they do. This is a sort of a really big scale because it's my experience. This is an experience that I've had. Something that's personal, I guess. Anyway, so we have another session. What have you done? Well, I blah, 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 and blah, 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 and blah, blah. Oh, you did? When? Where? what time was it, so forth, all the specifics. Here I went into what is known as a automatic creation, like a clear. I was creating my own bank. I was making things available so that people could audit me now. I knew how to do it. You have to make it up. Then you tell it to the guy. He writes it down. Oh, look at all the stuff. And then he says, oh, your deal's flowing. Oh, great. So I did that. And I lasted about, we went on for about 9 days. About 9 days after that, and then I was told I was going to be released. But before I was released, they asked me, how do you feel about the Sea Org? I love the Sea Org. I love it. I love all of you. You saved my life. They did. I would have died down there if I hadn't changed. So in actual fact, they did save my life. You know, I've loved every one of them. Hugged them when I got out. Saw daylight again. And I saw my son and my wife, which I wanted to do. So, that was like a point of 20 days. Now, every time I got involved where I had committed overts, I had done bad things against the organization, dug a crooked ditch, backhoe. Sorry I did it. I really am. Kurt, I'm sorry I dug a crooked ditch. David Miscavige, I'm sorry I dug a crooked ditch. I'm sorry I didn't meet your standards. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry. I really am, too. Because like I said earlier, the people I met in Scientology are great people. They really are. And it's unfortunate that this is occurring to them. It hurts me. And I don't want to get involved with that kind of stuff. Anyway, that is what happened to me in a 20-day period. I spent approximately 4.5 to 5 years off and on in this RPF thing. And if I were to try to explain 20 years of various types of things that occurred in the Sea Org, it would really take a long time. So I think I've covered most of the things there. Yeah. Okay? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Andre. Great.
Listening to Andre speak reminded me of a couple of things. I was never in the RPF and the Sea Org, but I know many, many people who were in the RPF and who had experiences very similar to what Andre outlined to you. Andre's treatment was neither extreme or unusual in comparison to many other people who received similar treatments. I know one woman who was in the Sea Org, and she was assigned to the RPF, and they were building and refurbishing the buildings in Los Angeles, and she was pregnant at the time, and they were working, 30 hours on and 5 hours off, or something ridiculous. You know, sleep 5 hours, work 20 hours. Sleep 5 hours, work 20 hours. She was pregnant. She had a very complicated and difficult pregnancy, when it came time for the baby to be born, and the first 2 years of the baby's life were strewn with illnesses and serious conditions. Praise God that he is now a healthy teenager, this boy. Yeah, really. But, this is typical and usual. For me, when I was here in Clearwater and I was in the Sea Org, and when I finally decided, yes, I'm going to leave, I'm going to get the routing form, and I'm going to route out of the Sea Org. I wasn't going to leave Scientology, just the Sea Org, but that's a pretty bad thing to do. And so they took me off my post and sent me into the kitchen to wash pots, and they feed a lot of people over there, so they've got a big kitchen and big pots, and there's a huge metal trough with like a sink and these big faucets, and I just turned on the water full blast, and it's splattering all over everything, and I would just cry. I mean, I was like bawling into this sink with this water on so that nobody could hear me, but it was such a release to just do that for a while. And it took me 3 months to finish a 3-page routing form and get out of the Sea Org and go back to California. But I did it. One of the things I wanted to mention, because I started talking about common practice amongst members of the Scientology community that aren't necessarily mandated by Hubbard's policy. As a public person in Scientology, I had many friends. We used to sit around and talk about other Scientologists and how they were doing, or what was sort of their status of Scientology, like how high are they on the bridge and how committed are they. We used to use the word, has he or she, have they cognited on Scientology? And cognited is a word in Scientology, a verb made from the noun cognition, which is a cognition is a sudden big realization about something. The word cognition and to cognite are used constantly in Scientology. We would always say, well, especially in speaking of people who are new to Scientology, you're hoping that they get through their fragile period and they sort of really make it to the point where Scientology is kind of bitten, if you know what I mean. We would always say, well, have they cognited on Scientology yet? Have they cognited on it yet? Have they had the realization? Later I realized, after I got out of Scientology, it was very, very clear to me that when we were discussing whether or not so-and-so had cognited on Scientology or not, what we meant was, have they reached the point where they have decided to swallow everything in Scientology, all the doctrines, hook, line, and sinker, and not question them? That's the point when you really become a Scientologist. And so it was, well, is the person just kind of doing, are they kind of trying Scientology out for size, or have they really become a Scientologist? And what we meant amongst ourselves was, have they ceased to question these doctrines and just take them at face value and accept them hook, line, and sinker? Which, dutiful Scientologist that I was, I'd been doing this for quite some time. Everybody's different. Some people get to that point very quickly. Some people take a long time, and it's a little bit more of a torturous experience. It's very different for each person. Oddly enough, the point when I actually popped out of Scientology, I was holding my e-meter cans in my left hand. I was starting to do an OT7 auditing session to chase more BTs and blow them off. And it had, due to discussions I'd been having with my family the night before, I had started to actually think about a few things, but I got up in the morning and I just automatically did my routine. I got up and started to do my little auditing session, and I got into it, and all of a sudden it hit me like a bolt of lightning that I had never, ever questioned this stuff about the BTs and Xenu, the body thetans and the volcanoes and 76 million years ago. I'd never questioned it. Of course, it was kind of a life-threatening thing to question it in my mind when I was trying to get on these levels, because they make it, they make you run a pretty intense gauntlet to get onto these OT levels. And it's built up and built up and built up, and the carrot is dangled in front of you for so long that you can't imagine not doing it. But the moment that I realized I had never questioned this whole story about Xenu and the body thetans and all this, my world split apart. And it literally, the bolt of lightning struck, and I started questioning everything from that point on. And I popped out of the mindset very, very quickly as a result of that. But it killed me that, I worked very, very hard as a student in college, and I was very proud that I completed college and had achieved a college degree. That was, that didn't get you any respect in Scientology, but I was still proud of that. And I had taken a number of courses in geology. I had written research papers on plate tectonics. I knew that the Hawaiian Islands are not even 1 million years old at the most. The oldest Hawaiian island is about 1 million years old, but the oldest Hawaiian island is already, it's not even an island anymore. It's already completely submerged by the ocean. But, the Hawaiian Islands was one of the main packaging areas when they packaged all these thetans into these big clusters. And that's supposed to be 76 million years ago. But the Hawaiian Islands have only been on the face of this planet for 1 million years at the most. Hello? This in Scientology is called an outpoint. It's a big outpoint that You know, this was supposed to happen 76 million years ago, but they've only been there for 1 million, and it could never have happened. That's a major, major outpoint. And I was chagrined and humiliated that I never figured all this stuff out sooner, but I'm glad I finally did. And that was all I had to say.
Thanks, Liz. We only have a few more minutes. I was going to show you a portion of a video about Sterling Management and how some dentists got involved with that, and what they were taken through in their process, and how they had, one of them at least, gave away $30,000 or $40,000 very quickly. Based upon the coercive pressures he was introduced to. But instead, because we don't have time, let me just tell you that the Scientologists are involved in a lot of different kinds of activities. Some of them are what I would call a front organization. That is an organization that stands in front of Scientology to hide the identity of Scientology, its connection with Scientology. These are part of what's called many of these called the Worldwide, or the World Institute of Scientology Enterprise, WISE, involved in many practice management companies. They call them licensing to them, license the Hubbard technology to them. But interestingly, when you go out to take their course of a week or 9 days or however long the course is out in Glendale, California, or other places, you suddenly are introduced not just to some of the Scientology management technology, but you're also introduced into Scientology. By Scientologists, you failed the personality test, you need auditing, you need to transfer over here to Scientology and get some of that too, and Scientologists are helping you to manage your business and consultant fees, and it goes on and on and on and on. Sterling Management and Irons and Balco and many others we could tell you about, but one of the particular groups that I have more personal experience with, I do have some experience with those things, but it's a little booklet called The Way to Happiness, the Way to Happiness Campaign, the Way to Happiness Foundation, which is another Scientology group. My introduction to this group was in Birmingham several years ago when a Christian who'd been to one of our seminars on just general occults recognized the name L. Ron Hubbard, because the little booklet that she'd gotten at her corporate office, she was in corporate affairs of a large company in Birmingham, and they have a division which is involved in charitable contributions and organizations, and the Scientologists have been there trying to get a contribution for the Way to Happiness Foundation. And she recognized the name on this booklet. And she said, is this connected with Scientology? I said, well, it probably is. Let me do some checking. Did some checking, got some documentation, and found out that this person did some more checking around and found this person had been all over town. Been to some black churches, been to some of the Housing Authority, Housing Project Authority, and other organizations, corporations trying to get funding. I began to follow this person around. I used to go around behind them, showing the documentation, what the Scientology was related to Scientology, and what the connection was. And of course, their contacts began to dry up. I then requested through this black church, a member of that church had been recruited by this Scientology staff person to work with her. And this first person, when she saw this information, was very upset and concerned, being a Christian. But she didn't believe it. And I showed her more information, documentation. Her pastor was there, and we talked through it. But through her, we arranged a meeting with this Way to Happiness campaign worker. And I had her, she came to my office, and she brought with her a big 6'4", 230-pound guy. Said it was her son. And she had her son when she was 10 years old, maybe, her son. But this guy sat down in front of me and did his stare routine with me. And anyway, I asked the woman, I said, are you a Scientologist? No. Are you familiar with the Church of Scientology? Well, I've heard of it. Is the Church of Scientology connected with the Way to Happiness? Well, no, none other than L. Ron Hubbard is. We thought he had a great little book here, and we thought we would promote this book. And just happens to be written by L. Ron Hubbard. I said, you don't have any. How long have you been working with The Way to Happiness? I forgot. She said like 3 or 4 years or something. I said, and you live in Los Angeles? Yes. And you don't know this is part of the Church of Scientology? No. It is. You sure? Then I pulled out the documentation from the Scientology's own literature. This was a flag service organization. And she immediately, when she looked at that, stood up, didn't say a word, and they turned around and stomped out of the office. Then I found out that I got some more documentation packets that the mayor of Tuskegee, Johnny Ford, had written all these glowing letters of endorsement to the Way to Happiness campaign. And several public official letters of endorsement. I said, boy, this is odd. So I called up. And these people were presenting this as legitimate documentation about the endorsement of their group, the Way to Happiness booklet. So I called up the mayor of Tuskegee. And I said, tell me about this. Tell me about this book. He said, oh, good grief, what a horror story. I said, what's the matter? He said, these people came representing themselves as this and this program, and we said, oh, sure, we'll always promote ways to increase moral values in our schools and in our city, and we'll promote this. And we wrote some letters. And all of a sudden, when we agreed to have some of these books come in, our town filled up with Scientologists. And then we began to find out what this group really was, and so we canceled all of our endorsements and withdrew all those things. I said, do you know they're still promoting it as legitimate? Real ethical, isn't it? Then I began to look up some of the other endorsements from letters of recommendation from the governor of North Carolina, the governor of Virginia, and even the governor of Alabama. That popped up. And so I started calling these people and found out that they were taking excerpts from letters, little words here and sentences here, to make it look like they were endorsing and giving this glowing praise. It was just a standard form letter they sent to many people to inquire. This is the kind of stuff that you see embellishing what there is. This is part of the Way to Happiness booklet. Don't be promiscuous. They say this is a reflection of the Ten Commandments. Just a kind of a new version of the Ten Commandments. The same thing they say. But that's not the Ten Commandments. Don't be promiscuous. And what you read through here, it just says, just be true to your sex partner. It doesn't say married partner. It just says your sex partner. It doesn't say whether it's male or female either, by the way. And we go on. I love this one. Seek to live with the truth. False data can cause one to make stupid mistakes. You can block one from absorbing true data. False data can come from many sources, academic, social, professional. In other words, as we know now, that only true data you can get is from Scientology. Anything else is false data. Here, I love this. What is true is what is true for you. What does that mean? Well, it means that if you just simply mean that if you perceive something to be true, that's what you act on, then that makes sense. But it's not clarified. And again, it's kind of a new age idea that you create your own reality, what is true. Look at this one. Do not harm a person of goodwill. That's conditional, isn't it? Do not harm a person of goodwill. Well, first you got to determine what. If a person's not of goodwill, then what? It's okay to harm them. And who determines what goodwill is? Well, the totalistic organization of Scientology determines what good is for people. People ask a lot, how do people leave Scientology? How do you get them out of Scientology? Well, you can't stereotype. People are different. People have different constitutional fortitudes, makeups, backgrounds, and more susceptible, more vulnerable than others. Some people are stronger, more independent than others. And again, it's very difficult to stereotype. Many people in cults walk away. Many people in cults walk away. And usually it's because the pain of staying in the organization is larger or stronger than the pain of leaving the organization. Obviously. I mean, that's one reason why the walkaways occur. the abuse that some people can get in cults. Other times, people just don't like putting up with all the legalism and the control and the do's and don'ts and the never measuring up to be good enough. They get tired of that and they leave. Some people leave for that reason, walk away. Some people get a hold of some information. Sometimes let me tell you about a Jehovah's Witness young man. He went to a Jehovah's Witness annual convention. And there were some Christians out there holding up picket signs, and handing out literature. And he, of course, not allowed to take that literature because the organizations, these cult organizations, say he's not allowed to read other literature that's in conflict with your beliefs or your church's teachings. So what happened here was he did mentally take note of the phone number. He saw one of the signs. Jehovah's Witnesses, please call this number. Don't be afraid. And a number he called. So he went back to the hotel that night. This guy was an elder in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Went back to the hotel that night, and he secretly called that number. And he heard some information. He wrote down the information. He said, I don't believe this. This isn't true. But they challenged me to check it out and see if it's not true. You can look it up under your own research. So he did. He sent off for it and gave a false post office box address so his wife wouldn't see it, and he got the literature. And he went back to the Kingdom Hall and checked out the literature again without anybody looking. He says, my gosh, the organization has lied to me. They've been lying all this time. And then he had dealt with it, wrestled with it. He knew he'd lose his wife and his family if he left. And finally, he couldn't stand it any longer. He said, honey, I've got to tell you something. The organization has been lying. I wrote off this number and got this literature. She said, thank God you found out too. I called that number too. And I got that information too. And I've been waiting for the moment to tell you this. And so thankfully they came out and they became Christians. They didn't. And sometimes cults burn people out against religion because they get a false view of who God is and a false view of who Jesus is, and they reject that view rather than the true view. So it's important for you as a Christian to share the truth about Christ. The gospel is the power unto salvation. Understand, though, that in some of these cults, the more mind control elements are there and coercive elements and thought reform, the layers sometimes are there. There's a lot of psychological issues that sometimes you have to deal with. Why are Scientologists taxed since they are not a church? Well, they are a church. They are a 501c3. The IRS has, after many, many years of battling, I'm not sure why, but they gave up the battle, and they are a tax-exempt organization. What about the movie stars, the issue of the movie stars? Well, I mentioned that last night. I don't understand why, for some reason, well, I do understand why, but people tend to, of course, glamorize movie stars. We spend so much time with TV and watching movies that we have this unrealistic picture, this surrealistic picture that movie stars must be wonderfully intelligent. They must have the answers to life or something. After all, they played this great part on the movie, then they must be super intelligent people and have it all together. But for some reason, that's the way many people think. And so, therefore, cults will use celebrities, if they can, as their window dressing. But, I mean, Christians aren't necessarily immune from this. I've seen too many times Christians will put people out on the testimony circuit, celebrities on the testimony circuit, before they have really established their maturity with Christ. And that's not wise either. But this is people think that movie stars must have it together before they have an influence. But the trouble is you got Joyce DeWitt, like you saw last night, Shirley MacLaine, movie stars, and they say that the New Age movement is the answer. So which one? Which movie star is right? You know? Speak about neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. Is this part of the New Age? Well, it certainly is utilized by the New Age. It's a form of being able to, they think, read people and control people by the use of body language, inflections, postures, etc. And it can be a trance state formation, hypnotic state formation, but the National Academy of Sciences have thoroughly researched and tested the claims of NLP and the data about NLP and found it has absolutely no effect like it claims to have as far as being. The New Agers use it. Tony Robbins, the guy, the Awaken the Giant Within, and with you nothing is impossible with your mind, etc. That's NLP. He's involved in NLP, linguistic programming. If I had a son or daughter involved in what I would consider a dangerous cult, I would be tempted to kidnap and deprogram them. Are you for or against this practice? Are there alternatives? That's an interesting question. I wonder who wrote that. But let me, of course, say it's very clear that Watchman Fellowship is a Christian ministry, and we will not be involved in any kind of kidnapping because it's illegal. But I do understand and sympathize with parents of loved ones who feel that there is such imminent danger to that person's life and well-being that sometimes they feel like they have to resort to do it. I can't participate in it, but I understand what happens sometimes when it's your own child. But is there alternatives? Yes. There are ways to try to reach that child, to arrange for them to sit down, separated from the cult in their home or whatever, and to sit down and talk to people on their own, free will. And there are ways to help try to facilitate that, to consider the alternatives to that, what they've been taught, but to be shown documentation and information for them to evaluate what they've gotten into. This is what we would call exit counseling, or, of course, from a Christian perspective, you would also want to share with them the alternative as far as the gospel is concerned and evangelism. These are questions for Lisa. How could she afford all those courses, and how does she get out? She's answered some of those things. Andre's question about did he have a wife and family is, yes, he had a child, an aborted child. And where did they live? Who raised his son? Okay. What is the E-meter? It's an electrogalvanometer. It's a kind of a crude lie detector. It's supposed to measure electronic skin responses, which, of course, even sophisticated lie detectors aren't necessarily totally reliable. But these are supposed to tell when you are not being upfront or honest, or when you're telling the truth during your auditing sessions. Okay, is the Christian Science Church the same as Scientology? No. The Christian Science Church is an American religion, American-originated religion. The founder was basically a woman named Mary Baker Eddy. It does have some similar beliefs in the sense that you do kind of create your own reality. Your thoughts must be positive thoughts, etc. But they would say there's no such thing. If you become a practitioner of Christian Science, you will not have illnesses. You can escape from illnesses, and because illnesses and sin are really an illusion. They don't really exist. Therefore, it's just a mental aberration. But that would be not, it's not Christian, nor it's not science, Christian Science, but it's also not Scientology. Let's see. There's a question. A Mormon says that she believes Jesus is her only way to get back to heaven. She says no matter how righteous she is and how many good deeds she does, she can't get to heaven without Jesus. She says he took upon himself all of our sins. He knows all the pain she and everyone else has ever suffered. Because of him, we can all live again after death. She knows she will not, that works will not make her overcome death. That Jesus has overcome death for us. Now, first, that sounds good, doesn't it? Most of that sounds pretty good until you learn to talk Mormonese, to speak Mormonese, and you understand what those terms mean. When the Mormon theology teaches that Christ is the Savior of the world, they mean literally that he saved the whole world. Adolf Hitler, Mussolini, Charles Manson, all those guys have been saved by Christ. He is their Savior. They have been saved. Because what they mean by saved is resurrected from physical death. If you understand that, you can interpret that more clearly from Mormon perspective. It means that you only will receive resurrection. The whole world will receive resurrection, which is salvation, and then you'll be judged based upon your works. So they say, yes, you're saved by grace, because what Christ did in the Garden of Gethsemane, they say, is where he shed his blood, sweat blood. The cross was just an afterthought. The real suffering was in the garden. And because of his atonement, his blood, everyone is saved and will be able to get to some level of heaven. But that just means you're resurrected. In other words, he refinanced your loan. He refinanced your debt. Then you got to still pay by your good works, determine where in heaven you get to go, which level of heaven. So it is again a denial of the substitutionary atonement of Christ and trust in him alone for all of our sins. That is a mixture of works and grace, which is not the gospel of salvation biblically at all. It's work, 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 work. Okay, our time is completed. Boy, I appreciate the courtesy. We must have 70 Scientologists in the crowd in the last hour or so. But I really do appreciate what the church has done, Bill. The membership here is committed to this. You've chosen, I understand, as a church to stay here in Clearwater, to minister to this area. You've not abandoned it. And you have a real heart and desire, as you told me, Bill, for the lives and souls of Scientologists. And I hope that we all will. It's easy to get upset and even sarcastic sometimes, especially when they act that way. But remember the 2 Timothy 2 passage. The Lord's bondservant must not be quarrelsome, but be kind to all, able to teach, patient when wronged, and with gentleness correcting those who are in opposition. If perhaps God may open their eyes, and they may come to their senses and escape the snare of the evil one, having been held captive by him to do his will. Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the only hope. The only way you're going to have is find out who you are and what you're doing here and what is life all about and where you're going to go is in God's only provision for that in Jesus Christ. Again, I thank you all. And if you have any needs for questions about cults, any coaching, any specific materials, if you have a friend or a relative or a family member or whatever is in a cult and you want some specific information, our office is there for you. Just give us a call, drop us a postcard. Be as specific as you can because we have so much information about these different groups. It helps us to be more specific about these cults, and we'd be glad to help you in any way we can. Again, Bill, you want to come up and close us out?
Let's all stand. Yeah. Thank you, Craig. Let's quote two scriptures together, all right? The first one is about you shall know the truth. You ready? You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Now there's another one that identifies the truth. Say it with me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. So said Christ. God bless you, and you're dismissed in his grace.